I think we'll get started now, given that some of our speakers have to leave a bit early tonight. So thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate that you've been able to make the time to come today, and we're very excited to hear all of your insight. So today's panel will be on career paths in EU economic institutions. So we will hear from trainees or past trainees from the ECB, the EIB, the ESM, and the ESMA. And yeah, we're very excited to have you. And I'll just hand it over to Celine, who's the president of the EconSoc, to say a few words.
Hey guys, I'm Celine. I'm the president of the Econ Society. Really, really excited to see people here because obviously working in European economic institutions is something that's crazy interesting. A massive thank you to Eurosoc for taking the initiative with this project. But we're just really, really excited to see everyone here, and I hope everyone takes a lot out of this event.
So I think we can just go into questions right away. So my first question would just be for all our panelists to please just introduce yourselves, including your academic background, what your role in the institution at the moment is, just to sort of give the audience a bit of an understanding of what you're up to. And if we could start with Niels.
So my name is Niels. I studied at the LSE this year. I finished this year. I'm from France. I did my undergrad at Sciences Po. I did the dual master's degree with the LSE in Political Economy of Europe at the LSE and Economics and Public Policy at Sciences Po. And I'm now at the SSM within the ECB for a traineeship. And regarding the career paths it offers, I think we'll address this later, but there are a few possibilities within the ECB and maybe also just by, I don't know, maybe the national, in France or somewhere else, or maybe the EU. But then again, these would be other institutions with other specific rules. So we can maybe discuss this later.
So one of you guys can just continue answering the question.
Okay, perhaps I can go. It's very similar. So I'm Tennessee, I'm French too. I was studying in Political Economy of Europe at the European Institute last year. And before that, I was studying in political science and international relations in France and Belgium. I'm at the moment working for ESMA. I'm in the market data policy team, which is in the markets department. So basically I'm working on regulations on financial markets, so derivatives and shadow banking, everything that is not commercial banking. Voilà.
Okay, I think I can go next. I'm Pietro. Hello, everybody. I'm Italian, obviously, and I'm a student at the LSE at the moment, doing a 2-year Master of Public Administration at the School of Public Policy. And I did a traineeship at the European Stability Mechanism, the ESM, over last summer. So between year 1 and year 2, I did my undergrad in International Economics and Management at Bocconi in Milan.
I can go next. Hi, I'm Tommaso. I come from Italy as well. Last year, I was actually the president of the European Society while I was studying at LSE, the Masters in European and International Public Policy. Before that, I undertook another Masters in Intelligence and International Security at King's College. And I did my bachelor's degree in international relations at the Università Cattolica in Milan. And at the moment, I'm actually undertaking a traineeship at the European Investment Bank, which is based in Luxembourg, but as many others, I'm actually smart working from home. And I'm working in the social policy unit, which basically is part of the projects division. And it kind of tackles all the different social, environmental, and climate criteria for all projects to be approved by the EIB. And mainly I'm working on the focus between gender equality and climate.
Great, thank you all for those answers. So could you please briefly discuss the institution that you work for and give a broad overview for the audience of the different career paths that it has to offer? Tommaso, I guess we can sort of continue on with you.
Of course. Well, the EIB is the lending arm of the European Union, which basically means that it is a European body, but it is not a European institutions, because the main stakeholders are actually the member states. It is also the biggest multilateral financial institution worldwide, and it operates all around the world. And it is also considered to be the EU climate bank, because not only is trying to foster all the different Paris agreements and aligning with those, but is also trying to boost different criteria to spread both across EU projects and in non-EU countries as well. It works with both public and private partners, and it mainly operates within the EU. Like 80% of the projects are carried out within the EU, whereas 20% are operated outside the EU. And yeah, as I said, it is based in Luxembourg, but it has offices also in many other countries, both within the EU and outside. Yeah, in terms of different career paths, if you want, like if you are a recent graduate or if you're still studying, you can either access the European Investment Bank through either a traineeship or a graduate scheme. A graduate scheme is more for people who have a professional background, which means that you should have finished your master's degree or you should be doing your PhD, and you should have at least 1 year of professional experience. Whereas if you're trying to access it through a traineeship, you can still be studying or be a recent graduate with less than 1 year of experience. As long as, you know, if you're able to stay within the bank, then there are, of course, different roles, which can be either junior or senior. For example, in my department, development strategist or business analyst. And then like there are all types of managerial positions as well. It's important to highlight that although it is a financial institution, it doesn't only do financial related jobs. Like if you're interested in communication or in marketing or simply in business, but not in finance, you can still apply to positions both for traineeships, graduate schemes, or for, you know, other positions in those types of fields. And there are also positions open to people who are trying to specialize themselves in either environment or climate or social issues. In fact, they're always recruiting for social specialists, environmental specialists, and then there are, of course, external partners, which means that if you work for in any type of firms and you're trying to pursue a different agreement with the EIB, you can still be part of the EIB while you're working at another institution. And yeah, more or less, I would say that these are all the different types of career path to follow.
Great, Pietro, do you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I know I have a great benchmark I need to live up to in terms of explaining how the institution works. So I was at the ESM. The ESM, as many of you know, is the permanent crisis resolution mechanism of the Eurozone. It was founded in 2011 in the midst of the financial crisis, the Eurozone sovereign debt crisis. It's kind of the heir of the EFSF. So the EFSF was the first mechanism that was implemented to give loans to Ireland and Greece and Portugal, and then the European countries realized they needed a permanent crisis resolution mechanism. So what the ESM basically does, so the main purpose of the institution is to so the ESM has a capital which is 80 billion, and with 80 billion are a guarantee of the creditworthiness of the institution, and then the ESM basically leverages this capital to raise more funds on markets and then lend those funds to program countries. Okay, so this is pretty much what the ESM does. At the moment, you may ask why would I want to go to work for an institution that used to be very important during the financial crisis. Now it's less important, but there are a lot of things going on there. You have for instance, Greece is gonna finish repaying their loans in 2070, according to the last measures that were implemented. And it's also central in a lot of discussions. For instance, if the new treaty change will be signed by all countries, the ESM would be the kind of the lender of last resort to the single supervisory, to the single resolution mechanism. So kind of the probably Niels is gonna be able to explain this better than me, but the ESM would be kind of the safety net to the European banking sector in case of a severe crisis. Now in terms of career path, just to avoid being too long. So the main teams, which are probably most interesting to ELSE students, are the policy strategy team, which is the one I was into. It's headed by Nicola Giammarioli. Maybe some Italians in the audience will know him because it was very much covered in the press discussing the new pandemic instrument. And the team covers relations with other European bodies, so like the Eurogroup or the Commission, and current debates on new tools. And it also designs new tools, for instance, the pandemic crisis support credit line. Then you have funding and investor relations. So that's the team of the CFO. If you're interested in, covering issuance of new bonds, the funding of the institution itself, and then the loans to program countries, that's the place to go. Then you got the economic department, which is also very interesting if you're into research, especially, of course, macroprudential and financial stability research. Then you got the legal team. So if you're interested in legal law, in European law, you've got some experts evaluating, new proposals, whether they comply with the current legal framework. And then corporate governance and internal audit, which is also kind of a path to get into the institution, maybe do some boring stuff at the beginning, or at least boring depending on, preferences. But then from there, you can maybe move to something you might be more interested in.
Great. Tennessee, Niels, one of you guys take it away.
Well, I couldn't say that ESMA played a big role during the crisis because it didn't exist. So I think I'm working for the most recent agency among us. So ESMA has been created in 2011, following the crisis. There has been a report at the beginning of the crisis in 2009, saying that it was necessary, to avoid the next crisis, it was necessary to create a new supervisory mechanism. So the European Union created 3 agencies for the EBA, the European Banking Authority, which was in London and is in Paris now. ESMA, the European Securities and Markets Authority, and the last one, it's EPCO. I don't remember what it stands for, but basically it's for pension funds. So yes, ESMA has been created in 2011. The main objective was to protect investors. That was one of the main objectives, to make the financial markets safer in Europe. So there has been many regulations following the creation of ESMA. So ESMA is an agency that has the power to propose a regulation or to modify a regulation directly to the European Commission. And if the European Commission adopts it, then it becomes like something. So maybe you have heard of MiFIR, MiFID II, EMIR or SFTR, like that's a big package of regulation following the crisis. And the main idea was to create also like a transparency to financial markets, because one of the causes, and there are numerous causes, but one of the reasons of the crisis was that we actually didn't understand some products on financial market and didn't understand what was going on. The main mandate for the ECB was to maintain the price stability, but there was just like too much liquidity on the markets, and some products, derivatives products that were very opaque. We didn't understand how it works. Like it was traded in a way, we call that over the counter, but basically directly between banks, between hedge funds, equity firms, but nobody knew what was going on. And it's 80% of the transaction in Europe, which is like a lot of transaction that was just like non-supervised. So yeah, there has been a lot of regulation since then, and basically now like firms have to report all the transaction to ESMA, and then like you have a lot of regulation like saying, oh, it has to be reported, guidelines and everything. And then when it's when you have the transaction, you can analyze the systemic risk that can come from all this transaction. So basically, yes, it's a young agency, which is like kind of nice because it's growing. I think every year there are 30% more of staff, like an increase of 30%, which is like a lot of people coming each year. I think it's an agency of a bit more than 200, 250 people for now. We are 30, 40 trainees, and in terms of career path, it's a bit different if you compare with ECB and EIB. We don't have a graduate scheme, and basically you can apply directly to jobs like the European Commission. You can stay like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in a temporary contract. You can just come as an EPSOS with the EPSOS test, like the rest of the European institutions, and you can start with a traineeship. So usually you stay 6 months, but most people stay 1 year because it's a very technical agency. Everything we do is very technical. So after 6 months of traineeship, you don't understand everything that you do. Actually, I mean, you try to, but you have many things to learn in 1 year. So I would say that most trainees are staying 1 year in traineeship. Yeah. I will let the floor to Niels now.
Okay, so these were great presentations. I will try to bring something more on the form because I have a presentation I can share. If the host will enable screen sharing, that would be great. I can also do it orally if you want. Okay, perfect. So does everyone see the screen or not? Yeah. So I don't know if it's necessary to present the ECB. We're all studying, well, we all studied at the LSE. So if we don't know what the ECB is, it would be pretty frightening. So well, if you still need an example, so this is the ECB maintaining financial stability, monetary policy, but also banking supervision, which is the SSM where I'm working in. And so I'll go directly to the traineeships and the graduate programs because this is the interesting part. So why would you want to join the ECB? Of course, it's a pretty cool name, but you can, as with Tommaso, there are a lot of different areas you can work in, from economics to finance to legal and statistics. So you see a bit of everything. And once you're here, you realize that there are a lot of trainees who are working on HR, IT stuff, and not just the core activities of the ECB. And to be honest, you see very few trainees who are active in monetary policy or some of the topics which you would associate with the ECB a bit more. Of course, to develop professional and social networks, this is similar to the ESMA 2, where the first contract you get when you sign a traineeship agreement is 6 months, but usually people stay for 1 year. And depending on the area you're in at the ECB, you may hope to have a short-term contract, which are pretty attractive contracts over from 3 months to 1 year, and you may hope for it to be renewed. But to get a fixed-term position, of course, it's way more complicated. And so you maybe go back somewhere else and come back later, or you could go through the national authorities. That would be another possibility. And you have a very diverse, sorry, I have a colleague who's looking into the office. I have well, there's a very diverse work environment. So a lot of Italians. So if unlike the LSC where you have a lot of French, here it's a lot of Italians, not so many French, a lot of Germans, but you also have Swedish people from all over Europe. So it's really cool in the everyday life. And for some people who are frightened because they always think of Frankfurt as a terrible city because it's in Germany and everyone speaks German. When you work at the ECB, everything is in English and you could very well navigate through everyday life without speaking one word of German. So what makes the ECB an attractive employer? So with a lot of great things, well, you'll see the pictures. A lot of these are not accessible with COVID, but you even get the apartment for free. So that's really great because you don't have to prepare anything at all. And so what are the opportunities? So basically there are two things, the traineeship contract and the graduate program. I think at our stage, since most of us are master students, it is the traineeship scheme you should really aim for because it's well, more accessible to you. It's less selective than the graduate program, which really targets PhD students. So to be honest, I never even thought of applying to the graduate program because unless you want to work in communications where you wouldn't need a PhD, you would need a PhD for all the other tasks. So I think you can read off this slide. It's the classical traineeship experience where you learn a lot while working there with colleagues, and you'd be working as a full member within a team. So this is pretty cool because you don't have a direct supervisor who tells you exactly what to do, but you're considered as a, I don't know, as an entity, as your as a contributing entity, and so you're given the same work as analysts. So that's pretty cool. So you get interesting tasks, and you get to see a lot of important documents. And okay, duration 3 to 6 months. Mine was 6 months, but it's true that I heard of some people who whose initial contract was like 4 months. You get 1,070 euros traineeship allowance, but you get the accommodation on top. You get a lot of different privileges. You even get a COVID allowance if the ECB is very, very generous. So that's really cool. I'll go through the graduate program very quickly. This is a 2-year program, which is mainly aimed for PhD students. You'll find everything online, so I won't spend too much time on this, but it's a great opportunity to work at the ECB and stay a bit longer too than what you'd normally expect with the traineeship contract. And of course, well, beyond the content of the traineeship, the gratification, the monthly grant is pretty generous. And that's, I think, is the last slide, which is pretty important because for the interview process, it's very selective, of course, but well, with an LSC diploma, you have a huge advantage. And you may have behavioral questions, you may have content-oriented questions, and for the behavioral ones, do not underestimate them. It feels like you're being recruited by Amazon because they ask you to talk about experiences, well, very weird experiences where you may have been in a situation with a stressful manager or with 2 deadlines and 2 equally important projects for the next day. And so you're supposed to talk about a situation, the task, the action, and it's better to hold on to this, to the STAR method. And recruitment process is very different according to the area you apply to. If you're in communications, they may ask you to write something down as an exercise. If you apply to something more quantitative, you may have a more quantitative exercise. I had pre-recorded questions for the interview, which was the most difficult part of the interview process, to be honest, more difficult than the interview with the panel themselves, well, with people who worked in my division themselves. And for me, it took 5 months. And so I think this concludes my presentation, and I'll stop sharing.
Great, thank you for that. So now I wanted to sort of go a bit more into detail about your current traineeships or the ones that you have done in the past with Pietro's case. So could you talk a bit about what the experience was like, what projects and tasks you worked on sort of a weekly basis, and what responsibilities your role entailed? I guess, Niels, do you mind continuing to talk now?
Sorry. So on our specific traineeships, what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. So what did
Okay,
your tasks involve, and what were sort of your responsibilities on a weekly basis?
Of course, I'll just quickly answer to Marvin, who asked if 2 or 3 months summer internships are possible. Technically, they would be, but if you were to indicate that you only wanted to come for 2 or 3 months, they'd show you the door because they have way too many candidates, and they're looking for, it's technical as Tennessee said, so they won't get anything from you in 2 or 3 months. So if this is your intention, I don't think it's even worth it applying to the ECB, and maybe wait for a moment where you have a 6 or a 10-month horizon to do the traineeship. But I wouldn't recommend it at all. And I think that even if you were to suggest it within the application process, that they would just eliminate your application. So it's not like in the UK where you can do this in finance. It's I think the commitment is different. So on Caroline's question regarding my traineeship, so I'm within the SSM. It has been reorganized recently, so the names are a bit different, but I'm in the horizontal supervision. So this means I'm not in a JST, which are these teams which supervise banks directly with national competent authorities and the ECB, but I'm in the horizontal supervision, so I look at all the banks. And more specifically, I'm in crisis management, so we take care of all the banks which do not do well, where there are procedures to implement some early intervention measures to determine if they're failing or likely to fail. And then they're sent to the SRB, which is in Brussels, who may bail them out or not. And so it's really interesting because if you are supervising, let's say, a big bank, it would be a bit like supervising a huge ship. It wouldn't move a lot, and it would be pretty stable. You wouldn't have a lot of ups and downs, and you wouldn't see a lot of different aspects. Whereas when you're in crisis management, you see the banks in all their characteristics, and you follow them pretty closely. And the ECB has quite a lot of power in implementing measures. So well, in my case, it's really great. The colleagues are great, and the overall vibe is pretty good too, because my colleagues are pretty young. So it's pretty dynamic. It's really interesting on the content, and I don't know if there's anything else I could add at this stage.
No, that's great. Thank you. Tommaso, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, sorry, but I didn't say it before, but yeah, the traineeship at the EIB lasts for 5 years, and it's non-renewable. So after the 5 years, only if your university requires it, you can stay for 1 additional month. The only way to stay like longer is to apply for a graduate scheme or for like another position. If you come from outside the EU, you can still apply for traineeships, and traineeships last for up to 1 year. So like for only EU members, since there are many more applications, yeah, like you can only stay for up to 5 months. And yeah, in terms of what I do like in my everyday like routine, well, I work in the social policy unit, which is part of the projects directorate. And we mainly liaise with all branches of the EIB in order to say whether our applications that arrive for projects comply with social, environmental, and climate standards. So basically, every day, like we revise all the different applications and see whether they are in compliance with these. We also hold a very like big variety of meetings with all like parts of the bank, but also with external partners. From last week, I've also been part of the gender help desk, which basically liaises with all external partners in gender issues, in gender related issues. So we both tackle like gender equality from a social point of view, but also from a climate point of view, which is something very unique of the EIB. And then there is also like lots of more like a report writing, also like reading articles and provide summaries to my supervisors. I also like answer to the different like emails with like different queries. And yeah, it's more like an administrative like aspects of the work. But overall, I would say that it's very dynamic, although like doing it and starting it from remote, of course, like takes away the whole interaction with other trainees, and also like in-person interaction with other members of my team, in which there are 9 people, including myself. Except for me and another Italian, there are other 7 people from other European countries, and I'm the only man. In the climate and environmental office, which are always part of the same division. I would say it's pretty like well represented in terms of nationalities, with like as Niels said before, Italians, French and Germans are always the most better represented people within our different teams. I would say yes, that kind of summarizes what we do.
Great. And Tennessee, do you want to continue?
Yeah, of course. Okay, as I was saying, I'm in the market data policy team. So we are divided. We are 10 people working on two different sub team. So basically, one of the team, and I cannot talk too much about it because I'm not sure what is the regulation about, and I still don't know like this part of my team. But the other parts, we are working on the EMEA regulation and the SFTR regulation. So it's everything that is about reporting the trades, all the financial transactions to create transparency for financial markets. So like more concretely on a daily basis, we are working on like improving the regulation. That's the first step. Because like during the crisis, there has been this new regulation, EMIR, and then SFTR more recently. But it has been created from scratch, basically, because there were no other regulation like that in the world. So obviously the regulation wasn't perfect. Sometimes it was too costly for firms. Sometimes like it was too difficult to implement something and everything. So years after years, we are improving the regulation. So that's part of my work, improving the regulation. And we do that with regular meetings with national competent authorities. So that can be a central bank, that can be financial regulators. In some countries, like it's the same institution. For example, I don't know, we are working with the Czech National Bank. We are working with the IMF in France, which is the financial regulator, or BaFin in Germany. And we have regular meetings with them, we meet, and then we discuss about the point to improve. There are multiple levels with the European Commission on one side, which is like very like the highest level, which means that they give like very broad strategy, very broad ideas, and then like we put it in practice at ESMA, and then NCAs, the national competent authorities, basically they apply like what we are doing at the EU level, and they work directly with the firms in each country, meaning that sometimes ESMA can directly supervise a financial company, but most of the time, like the IMF or BaFin will work directly with them. So we have all of that. At the same time, all this reporting, we have to answer a lot of questions because the regulation again is very broad. There are like a lot of new financial products every day. There is an increasing use of data in financial markets. So that's a lot of information everywhere. So someone has to keep it. Someone has to analyze it, like to understand the big trends and everything. So basically, we are answering to NCAs and financial companies many questions almost every day. So someone like a company from Bulgaria or even the US, because they have to report if they trade with Europe. They're asking questions. So, how would you do that with that project in that kind of situation? And then, as a trainee, you will work with someone like to answer the question by interpreting the regulation. So you will say, okay, the article say that. Then we have guidelines. We have like what we call technical standards, which means that basically this document that explain how to do all the things that is in the regulation, that are in the regulation. So we try to create to explain how it works in practice. And for like each case, sometimes it's a bit too complex, sometimes it's a bit like too interpretative. So we will work with what we call task force, so like national competent authorities, to discuss with them how to answer. That can be something. Sometimes we answer directly. That's depending on the project, it can be very technical. So sometimes, I mean, when you are starting your traineeship, basically after LSE, the first week they gave me like just like so many documents, and they said, okay, you have 1 week, you read everything, you try to understand. I didn't. The second week they ask you to answer to like whatever investor, and you're like, okay, I'm writing a paper, I'm writing a note like for the investor, and I don't know what I'm talking about, I don't understand anything. And then like weeks after weeks, actually you just learn, and after, like, I can say after 2 months I can answer to someone like with a good interpretation of my regulation. No, I mean good, like more or less, but at least you learn a lot. And what else? I'm talking for the markets department, but there are also like at ESMA teams and departments that work on supervision. So basically, like the ECB is supervising commercial banks, so big commercial banks, and we supervise like other kind of institutions. So we supervise national authorities, and we supervise the credit rating agencies, for example. That's a power that came after the crisis. And there are also like the risk and economics department that work on all like the analytics, like to understand the big trends, to understand all the risk on financial markets. And they're working on very cool projects. If you are like more an econ profile, I'm more like a policy profile, so I'm good with my team. But they're working on the crowdfunding, they're working on digital finance, they're working on implementing the capital, like enhancing the capital market unions, which like they have a lot of very good projects, very cool projects. And as it's also a smaller agency, you have the advantage to like be very involved in your project. That's very cool. I mean, we're working like for the entire regulation on market infrastructure. We are free to work on that. So 1 trainee and like 2 people. And we're working with like, again, all national authorities, which is very cool. This afternoon, I was in a meeting with like all central banks, and we were discussing for like hours, actually, like for many hours. But that was very cool. That's it.
Okay, so I think I'm the last one. So I did a freelance traineeship over the summer. It wasn't a summer internship per se, that they were pretty flexible with the start and end date. So I managed to do it over the summer, between year 1 and year 2 of my master, as I already said. So it wasn't a typical traineeship. It was kind of a peculiar one in the sense that they hired me with the specific objective of enhancing, getting a step forward, a research project these 2 economists had in the drawer, but didn't manage to spend time on. So I basically had to, dedicate the time they didn't have on the research project they had been carrying on for a while. So I basically did research assistantship. So everything that research assistantship entails: collecting, cleaning, and analyzing data, data and Excel stuff. So usual stuff. It was pretty cool in the sense that I got to dive into the data of program countries, some data sets, and some stuff are not public, and so pretty interesting from that point of view. You got to see how they design these programs when countries were in trouble. So So yeah, I don't think that there's much I can add to that.
Great, thank you so much. And then I guess we wanted to hear a bit more about what skills and knowledge would you say are sort of the most important and paramount to your everyday responsibilities? I guess you very briefly mentioned this, Pietro, but can you brush upon just except for data and Excel, what else was required for you to conduct your work?
For me, nothing more than that. Yeah, Excel, data, ability to speak English, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, great. What about you, Tommaso?
Yeah, I would say that maybe a very important skill that you need to have, but that you're also I think able to develop throughout the traineeship is of course flexibility. You need to be very flexible because maybe one day you do more administrative stuff, whereas another day they want you to do some more in-depth research, and another day you have to do something on stat, Excel, or more IT things. So yeah, flexibility, and also have good research skills. If you, of course, we are all at we were at LSE, so we are familiar with the UK system, and I think that the UK system really strengthens on the academic papers. So I think many times it's also very important to be able to write in a proper way, and many times they expect you to write a report as if you were writing an essay, but from a less let's say formal point of view. It's not important to do the literature review, but to be able to convey content and to find proper data, it's essential. Yeah, and also to have good communication skills, because many times you need to interact with people from both from your team but also from other teams. Then of course when you do it in person, it's much more easier than doing it online. But yeah, that's definitely a soft skill that is essential in this kind of works.
Sorry, I pressed the wrong button there. Niels, you want to continue?
Yes, of course. Skills I use in my in my daily work life. Pietro said, it's once you're out of our studies, generally you're capable of thinking straight, and for the tasks you have been given, you have enough time to figure it out yourself. You learn a lot on the job. But it's a lot of Excel. It's a lot of just research on different documents. In my case, you don't have to do bibliography, but you really have to. Anything you hand in has to be really perfect. So this is something they get quite frustrated over when some trainees do not double check data, and when you have especially banking data, you should be a minimum comfortable with numbers and with Excel, because these are huge sums, and you should not place the dot at the wrong spot, because this could have consequences. And this has happened before, that these mistakes have been made. So you have to pay a lot of attention. You have to be able to work under pressure, because this depends also on where you work at. But in my division, I know it's crisis management, so it has happened that some people stay over weekends and for 10 days straight in the office because a bank was failing. This may happen. So work under pressure, be able to be concise. This is something which you learn at LSE, compared in my case, to Sciences Po, where you blabber on for 10 pages. At LSE, you have to be able to just provide one note with 3 points, and this is all. So they appreciate it. I think this is also why they take a lot of people from LSE. It's simply that we can boil it down to the very core of the subject, and take a strong stance in favor of 3 points and nothing else. So this is maybe what my studies may have brought to me, but then again, you learn a lot on the spot, and they don't expect you to be proficient or have a PhD or 3 PhDs in all the subjects. So it's normal. It's just part of the learning process. And one more thing for people who have questions for me, you can always contact me through, you can find me maybe on LinkedIn, or maybe I can share my email address to you later, just because it's a bit complicated to answer right now to all the questions, but I'd be happy to answer them separately.
And Tennessee, do you want to answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot have been said. I think speaking Italian can be a good advantage for EU institutions, I would say. No, joke apart. What we learn at LSE basically is like to have a new topic, not understand anything about it, and then to do our research and then to write about it, and that in a very short period of time. That's basically the main skill I needed at the very beginning of my traineeship, and even like today, and I will need it like for a very long time. And I think LSE taught me that. That's very, very important. And the second one, I would say, like when you work on regulation and when you write articles and when you write like reports on articles, you need to be, you need a strong attention to details, because everything, every word, every like, everything that is included in your sentence is very important, and it can actually change a lot. That's why sometimes investors are just contacting us because there is a word that is like unclear or not like usual in comparison with other articles. So like it can change the meaning of what they have to do and everything. So it can have like a very strong impact on the reporting and the way just the financial market is functioning. So yeah, attention to details is very important.
Great, thank you. And then into sort of the last question from our side would be, what tips and advice would you give postgraduates seeking to apply to these positions and then undergraduates looking to apply to these in a few years' time? How can they try to stand out against other applicants applying for similar positions? Tennessee, do you want to continue with the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the recruitment process is a bit different between departments, and I'm not sure about that the other departments, to be honest. I heard from trainees that some had like one very short interviews with practical tests, but that was like it's a shorter process than ECB and EIB. Personally, I had to send my CV, my cover letter, and the best like I mean you certainly know that, but you have to highlight what is related to what you want to do. And for me, like I was following in political economy, I followed political economy of finance, like courses like that, political economy of monetary integration. So I had an interest. I was preparing like what is ESMA, what ESMA is doing, like everything is very important for that kind of agency. Then I had an interview like 2 weeks after, a 40 minutes interview. And then after the interview, I had an offer like maybe 1 week after. So basically you come to Paris. So at the moment, like starting tomorrow, it will be entirely online for a certain period of time. But usually you have the choice to go to the office, which is like a very nice office. Niels were mentioning the grants. Basically, like we are paid more or less 1,700 euros for traineeship, which is like very nice to live in Paris actually. Other advice that I can give eventually. No, I think that's it. Yeah.
Great. Niels, you want to continue?
Yes, of course. For all those just sending me private messages, just contact me over LinkedIn. It's fine. It's just add me and it's not a problem. I'll answer you. Well, maybe this weekend. And regarding to stand out of the crowd, it's complicated because I think my best piece of advice would be, well, let's say that selection numbers are very, very, very high. In my case, I think we were 2 out of 350 who were taken for my team. So the best piece of advice I can give you is to apply to as many traineeship schemes at the ECB as possible. So you regularly see a lot of them online, and they're maybe every 2 months or every month you'll have a new one. Just apply to it, and you'll have people who studied maybe political economy who can find themselves working in a more technical traineeship, and they'll learn when they'll get there. So it's not a problem. So so really try to, I think I applied to 5 traineeships at the ECB. I was lucky enough to be taken in the one that I really wanted, but indeed, it's just try applying everywhere. It won't be taken against you. They won't even know, I think, if you apply to 2 different traineeships, and pay attention at every stage, even the beginning. Try to use some keywords with which match with the ECB's activity, because they receive a lot of applications, so they have to sort them out in a specific way. So this is just me making a random guess, but I guess they'd have some algorithms to see, well, to sort some schools, to sort some topics, and to see if you're compatible with a traineeship. But then they really look at every cover letter, and so on the 300 words you're supposed to write at 3 different spots, really make an effort to write to do this correctly, and prepare for the pre-recorded interviews or the technical tasks. Because this is another point where they'll eliminate a lot of people, and when you've made it to the interview with the physical people, you're already among the maybe 10 or 5 last %. So this is where you should even double down on efforts and try to. I learned I was for the SSM, so I learned. I went on the SSM website and tried to learn as much by heart as by heart. I tried to assimilate the most documents as possible, and this really helped because they saw that I was prepared, and it worked out in the end. And one more thing, if you're put on reserve lists, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because the ECB really uses its reserve lists. So often they'd have maybe 2 positions open within one division for the traineeship. And but it may happen that someone refuses it, or that they need more people. So they use the reserve list. So don't start crying if you're on reserve list. A lot of trainees were on reserve list, and it's nothing bad.
Great, Tommaso, do you want to continue?
Yes, like before, like giving an advice, I wanted to tackle 1 second how the application process works. It's similar to like other institutions. So basically, you first submit like up to 3 different applications, like to any department that is opening up like a position. And there is like a first screening of CVs. Then if you pass that step, you are invited to like an interview on HireVue, which are basically pre-recorded questions. Like they give you a question, you have 1.5 minutes like to think of what to say, and then 3 minutes to answer. My application had like 3 different questions, which were extremely specific. If you're thinking of like when you're invited, and you think of just pass by saying which are your skills or why are you interested, that's not like the step in which you are gonna like highlight your skills and competencies and professional experiences. That's really the last one. When you're invited to like the first interview, at least at EIB, they want to test your knowledge, not only on the EIB, but mainly on the position that you are applying for. So for example, like I applied to the social policy unit position, and basically the questions that they asked me were mainly related to like effects of climate change, but also what's the role, for example, of multilateral financial institutions in bolster gender equality and social development. So something extremely specific. And if you make it after the pre-recorded interview, then there is one last step in which just 3 or 4 people are invited, and there is your supervisor and the head of the unit or division asking you more like why are you interested, or where did you study, why are you applying, but also what are your future expectations. And like 2 advices that I'd like to give you is, if you're invited to the HireVue interview, please like bear in mind that it's very specific. So you really should like go in depth in your research when like preparing for the interview. And if you're also invited to the second interview, they also give you the chance to address questions to the team. So I would really suggest you like to have something prepared, also something very simple like what's the interaction between the EIB and other EU institutions, or the interaction between the EIB and other multilateral financial institutions. because it would actually show like not only that you made like your case, but also that you're very interested in the job position, and it's something that goes like outside the whole framework or of why the specific person is interested for that position. So really show interest. And yeah, if you get the job, I didn't say it before, yeah, it's 5 months the traineeship, and you also get like access to EIB facilities, which basically are the canteen and the gym. You don't have an allowance for like the apartment as at the ECB, but you get 1,500 euros as a reimbursement of expenses, which you can invest like in either housing or like any other thing, because there are actually people from Luxembourg and they get like the same amount. And yeah, you also get reimbursed your like inbound and outbound like flights or trains to get to Luxembourg.
Great. I think, Niels, you have to leave, but thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. And yes, if, like he said, I think if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to message him over LinkedIn. Yeah, thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for having me. And if I can quickly answer the 2 or 3 questions I see here. Knowledge on financial concepts, Pier Francesco. So for this, it is, well, one of the questions which was asked to me was, how do you calculate portfolio risk? So this was in the pre-recorded interview. So if I hadn't known this before, it was difficult to overcome this stage. So it may be tricky at times for some people. They didn't have any financial, well, too technical questions, but it's in the early stages, this is how they eliminate a lot of people. So maybe open a finance book and have a look at a few concepts. You'll have 2 minutes to prepare them. So for the technical questions, so you may have the time to check on internet and just as a reminder, so this may help. Then Agata, for technical regulation, when you apply to the position, usually they don't detail the technical regulation yet. So you're not aware that you will be working on this technical regulation. You can guess it from the context, but you may do your own research, but they'll never expect you to work on one article, and it would be a waste of time learning about one article or another, because you may be working on a different part within the law or within the regulations. So I wouldn't, I'd learn all the names and see what these regulations do, but I wouldn't go into too much of detail. And so what am I planning to do after that? I'd like to stay at the ECB, maybe. But there are a lot of short-term positions, but it depends a lot on the budget of one division or another. It depends on what area you work in at the ECB, but these contracts are pretty advantageous, and they're really, well, it's quite interesting, and the environment is really great at the ECB. So I'd love to stay here, but I may also think of applying to other area graduate programs, or probably the public sector. I worked at the Financial Markets Authority before in France, so this may be one other possibility to return there, because they would ask, typically people who are a bit further up at the ECB and somewhere else have gone through a national scheme before, have worked in the national regulation agency or central bank for 5-6 years, and then become head of division, etc. at the ECB. So you don't have that many people who are pure ECB people who have done everything in their career at the ECB. And I don't know if there's any, the bigger picture. So I work on crisis management, on resolution, and all of these processes. And so it's true that you lose the bigger picture, but at the same time, it's great because you get to discover areas you never really looked into before, and especially at the LSE, where you take a very wide picture approach, and you throw a lot of big keywords, which you don't really know what they represent practically behind. It's pretty nice seeing the other side, but of course, I guess you do not see the bigger picture at first, and it would take a few years to understand the process. But then again, I think especially for ESMA, that would be probably the most interesting, but because it's it's growing a lot and it's on the forefront of European integration. The SSM is a bit slowing down now because it was expanding crazy in 2014 to 2017 maybe, because they were staffing up. But for the bigger picture, well, I guess you have to do this yourself. And one last thing very cool about the ECB is that it's basically like a university. You get conferences on a daily basis about from academics from all the universities, well, basically Western universities. You often see LSE professor come by the ECB to hold presentations on diverse topics, on climate change, on anything possible. So you get all these moments where you can see the bigger picture, and you can still work on a subject which is completely different, and you'll always have colleagues who are academics who will be happy to answer those questions. So thank you very much for inviting me, and do not hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.
Yeah, and we can just continue with the question in terms of sort of tips and advice. Pietro, you haven't answered that yet, so.
Yeah, so I feel a bit uncomfortable giving fellow students tips on how to build a career, since I'm trying to build mine as well, at least the first step. But you know, what I can say about what worked for me getting the ESM traineeship was basically do research and know what the ESM does, and show that I knew what the ESM is, what it stands for, what it represents, and the role it has. Like I'm pretty passionate about you know, financial you know, European integration and all the process. So I think that that made me stand out, I guess. And yeah, like I think the main advice I would give is reach out to people on LinkedIn from places you might want to work at, and just ask what they do, and see if you like what they say, and ask tips to get into there. Yeah, that would be my main tip. Yeah, and do research, of course, beforehand, before going to the interview, but they're gonna ask you, you know, like the big thing they're working on. For instance, for me was the ESM treaty reform. So yeah, that would be it.
Great, thank you. And then I guess we can open it up to sort of questions and answers. So I know Niels answered these questions before, but perhaps this would also apply to you guys. So how much technical knowledge is required sort of in the application process, both financial, but also beyond that? Anyone who wants to answer, feel free.
Yeah, I can jump into it. Not so much concerning the policy, the markets department, and everything that is policy related at ESMA, because it's just too complex to know it very well before your traineeship, and you will learn it anyway during your traineeship. So I just remember, like during my interview, I prepared like the regulation, so I understand what it was about. You need to understand, like obviously if you do regulation on derivatives, you need to understand what is a derivative. So you need a sound understanding on what is going on in financial market, what is a financial market, what is an exchange, like all these specific terms. But at the same time, you don't need like a strong knowledge of what is going on with this regulation, like just what it is about, what the agency is doing, and yeah, some understanding on what is the regulation, but like not very precise, I would say.
Right, Pietro, Tommaso, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I agree with what Anisi just highlighted. I think you don't need like a complete expertise in anything. They don't expect you to. But if you're able, like during your interview or during the application, to mention for example, like a directive, a regulation, or a plan, or something that you know the European institutions want to realize and want to carry out in the near future, that makes your application stand out. But be sure that if they ask you something about it, you actually know what it is about, because it makes no sense to mention something that you are not really familiar with, just like to mention something to make it better. I think like also in terms of data, there's like no need to like mention like many datas, but if you're able to provide something to make your case, that's always something like super helpful. And yeah, as I said before, if you're invited to an interview, the first questions will be like more specific, which means that they don't expect you to know like a specific regulation, but they expect you to know the context in which regulations and plans and directives are being carried out. So if you are applying, for example, to my unit, the social policy unit, they expect you to know what the social environmental standards are, or what the gender action plan is, or what like the EIB is doing in that context, but you don't need to mention any specific articles or to go in depth in describing what the regulations are.
Pietro, do you have something to add, or should I move on to the next question?
No, I don't have anything much to add to that, but I can answer for the ESM to Samuel Huntington's question. The ESM recruits from all over the world, since this is a legacy of the fact that they were established as under Luxembourgish law rather than under international law. So they recruit from all over the world. So as a UK citizen, you can still work there if you're interested. For the idea, I will let Tommaso answer.
Yeah, I think that until like this intake, students or like young professionals from the UK can still apply as EU members, but like the EIB is open also to non like EU nationals, and it's actually more advantageous for non-EU like students because you can stay longer. So you know, I would say that you have more chances of getting in through the non-EU programs rather than the EU one. Yeah, also like in other institutions, I know that it kind of is the same. If you're also interested in pursuing something, for example, at the European Commission, I know many friends are still who are like British, they are still applying with the British passport, because I know that for the transitional period is still like you can still do it, but after that I think it's still under revision.
Okay, great. And then another question would be, I guess we're planning two together, is how you prove that you're passionate about the topic in the application process. And then secondly, what are you all planning to do after your internship? And is there a possibility to sort of convert it to a full-time offer? Tennessee, do you want to start?
Yeah, it's a very good question. You have to show not like, again, your strong knowledge about this kind of regulation, not this kind of regulation, but more like your sound interest concerning the sector. So if you want to work at ESMA, you have to show that you did something in relation with financial markets. Okay, I was in that was very easy like for me, because I was in political economy of Europe, so that was very focused. And then I was following very economic courses like political economy of of finance, political economy of monetary integration again. And you can be part of societies. You can like you can do many things to prove that you are passionate about like financial markets, or like the crisis, the creation of the banking union. You can do your master thesis in relation with that. I mean, there are so many things, and show during your interview that you are interested. So I was mentioning some articles about ESMA that I read in EFT, or like stuff like that, that can just show something real to the people you are talking to. Yeah.
Great, Pietro, do you have something to add to that?
No, not really, not really.
I mean, how did you show that you were passionate in your interview, and what do you plan to do after?
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, I just did some research on the website, and you know, like if you apply to the ESM, you need to show that you know what the when the ESM was created, why it was created, what it does, you know, the instrument it has. As for my next plans, I will surely let everybody know as soon as I know as well.
Okay, great. Tommaso, do you have something to answer to this question?
Yeah, I think like I kind of want to follow up on what Anicia and Pietro already said. Like I think you need to show, like by showing that you're passionate, just show that you did some research on that. Like for example, like to be completely honest, I wasn't very passionate about my topic, but I became passionate because I wanted the job. So like I did some really like in-depth research on what that entailed, and somehow I kind of got it. Also because like I'm doing one of those positions in which it's not necessarily super financial related or super economic related. Like I didn't want to do something on that, but I was very interested in the social and environmental aspect of the EIB. And so yeah, of course, like I have a background in economics and finance, but very, very broad. So I was able to highlight that I did research. That's how I kind of made myself passionate about the topic. And in terms of what I want to do next, in February, like the traineeship will be over, and I'm trying to understand whether or not they are considering opening any graduate positions. And I really would like to stay at the IB. Otherwise, I'd like to apply like for other institutions, but since you cannot do like 2 internships at 2 institutions, because you can only do something that lasts for only like 2 months. If you've done something that is longer than 2 months, you can only do 1 traineeship. So I will try to apply for like external partnerships, probably at the European Commission, or I'm also considering doing the EPSO like concours.
Thank you. Anyone, if you also have questions, you can also raise your hands, and then you can ask the question directly. But in the meantime, we also have a question from Samuel from the chat, and I think this is directed to you, Tommaso. So did I hear you say it's still possible for Brits to work in the EIB, or was it just wishful thinking? Oh no, it's a comment, I guess. Never mind. Do we have a direct question from someone in the audience? Yes, Samuel. We cannot hear your audience. Okay. Anyone else, if you have any questions, feel free to put in the chat or raise your hand. That way it's a bit more interactive.
Yeah, in the meanwhile, there are like 2 questions. What are you planning to do after your internship? Are you planning on converting? Yeah, basically at ESMA, you can say 6 months, as it's a very long learning process. Usually, like your team doesn't want to find someone else and to have to teach him again, like everything. So you can say 1 year very easily. So it's 6 months plus 6 months. And well, after ESMA, you can work for your financial regulators, like national financial regulators, for central banks. A lot of people are going to the European Commission as well, like FISMA, ECOFIN, like the big economic and financial DGs. And between the ECB and ESMA, it's also very porous, meaning that a lot of trainees that are working with me are from the ECB. So they did, you can combine both actually. You can do 1 year at ECB and like going in traineeship at ESMA. After that, you can do like 6 months, 1 year at ESMA and go to ECB after. So it's very porous. And in terms of career, it's the same actually, because there are some departments at the ECB that are working on the same thing that I'm doing on a daily basis. So basically, at some point, if you want to leave ESMA, you can go to the ECB or the European Commission. That's very, very easy. If you want to go to the private sector after ESMA, I would say that you would be working for a financial institution on compliance issues. So if it's like a topic that you like, then it's perfect. And then the other question, if you are involved with regulation on your daily basis, are you able to see the big picture? Well, no, as a trainee, it's very difficult to see the big picture of what you are doing. But what is very interesting, in my team leader is, we have a team meeting every week. and she tries to put all the things in context, which is like very interesting. Okay, we are doing that to do that because our strategy is to do that. So at the next meeting with blah, 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 we will do that because if we succeed, we can have that. I mean, that's all like the big pictures always. And I think when you just like, how do we say? If you become policy officer, senior policy officer, then team leader, you start to see the big picture because you have to. Like the technical work is more like for trainees, policy officer. You have to learn on the fields. But yeah.
Great. We have a question here from Samuel, who asks that given whether the institutions have given any indication about returning to work or returning to office after COVID, and what long-term work from home arrangements might be like. Tommaso, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, like basically with regards to trainees, most trainees, like we are on more or less 40 people, and 30 of us are working from remote, whereas 10 people are working in presence just 2 days a week. Like from last week, Luxembourg also announced like a curfew and like more like restrictive measures. So all EIB staff can choose whether to go to work to the office or not. If you go to the office, you can either go for like 1 day or 2 day max. Like you cannot go for more than 2 days. And at the moment, that's like the current like situation. Of course, like it's all very like unpredictable. And I think that they've said that for all trainees also starting in March, all those traineeships will be carried out online as well. So until the intake starting from September 2021, most traineeships will be delivered like by smart working. But if you work there, as I said, like you have the option of either go for 2 days or like to work permanently from home. And compared to other like maybe firms of other institutions, you can also work from remote. Like for example, I received an EIB laptop from Luxembourg, and like I can do anything I want, but I can work like also from home. For example, at the European Parliament, I know that some departments want you to be present in Brussels. So like compared to other institutions, the EIB also gives you this flexibility of working like from remote from anywhere in the world you want.
Great, thank you. Then a question here given by Celine, who asked that why were you drawn to work in European institutions as opposed to, for instance, the private sector? So yeah, Tennessee, do you want to start off with that question?
Yes, I can. Okay, that's a complicated one because as a French, if you don't have like a specific master degree in finance, you don't especially work in finance directly after, but you can still work on the policy side. You can like go to the Banque de France or the IMF, as Niels was saying before, like the financial regulator. I know that in the UK it's way more flexible, which is like kind of cool as well. But I studied for years, like more this, even if I'm very interested by financial markets, I'm more on the policy side. I did political science, I did international relations. I really want to see like the big picture of the thing at some point. And working in an institution like helps you actually to like get into it's still a technical work, but you have this policy side, you have this political side as well. Like everything is politics at some point, and it's very interesting to follow. It's very interesting to follow. So that's why I'm not in the private sector, but that can be something in the future. I don't know yet.
Great, Pietro, do you have something to add?
Yeah, so as for why the public institution, not the private sector, I guess, yeah, it depends. I think it's very subjective. For me, I'm interested in policy making. I hope one day to do policy making at some level. So I think it was an interesting possibility to get to know one of the few key institutions of European integration, and one big achievement of European integration of the last 10 years. As for another question I see in the chat on opportunities for non-EU nationals, the ESM, you can work as a citizen of any country of the world. Concerns or expectation before joining the institutions. So I would say for me, it was pretty clear that I was joining a public sector environment, in the sense that it's not like you get there, it's like a postal office, but I mean, you like it's not like in the I guess at least it's not like in the private sector where you have targets to meet, and it's more hectic. People are more relaxed, which I think depending on preferences can be very good or not suitable to your preferences. But you know, depending on also the division you're in, there's work to get done. So I guess that's pretty much it. But one good thing is that you start at 9 and at 6 you can, or even at 5, I guess, you can leave. And then what Samuel is saying in the chat is pretty much it. Not institutions are open to EU nationals. I'm pretty sure that process at the Commission or at the ECB, you cannot get in without the EU nationality. But the ESM, yes, exactly, as I said several times already.
Great. Tommaso, do you want to follow up on the question, both in terms of why you wanted to work for in the public sector, so the private, as well as, I guess, perhaps some concerns or on what your expectations, whether they were met when joining the institution?
Yeah, like to be honest, I applied to a little bit of everything, both in the public and in the private sectors. I was mainly interested, to be honest, in the public one. Like I applied to almost all EU institutions, but maybe we didn't say it before, but one big step to get in, it's the nationality quotas. And especially, although there are many French, Italians, and Germans, Italians, Germans, and French are also the ones that apply the most. So by bypassing the nationality quotas and being able to also being invited to an interview, that was really the biggest step. And of course, I'm very interested in the whole public policy and policy making process. And although the EIB is rather a policy taker than a policy maker, it's involved in the policy cycle of the EU at some level. So that's why I'm mainly interested. And also doing an internship at one of the EU institutions, bodies, or agency also makes you makes you very interested for recruiters also from the private sector once your traineeship is finished. So I'm sure that after this opportunity, it will enrich my CV, as also Niels said before in the slides. And in terms of expectations and concerns, maybe I only had two main concerns in the beginning. The first one, as Pietro said, was that considering that it's public sector, that maybe sometimes maybe you weren't valued enough, and maybe they were making you do rather an administrative work, or the whole stereotype of you just go there and make photocopies. But that wasn't true at all. Actually, I always have a lot of work, and all members of my team always try to to include me in all the work they do. So that's extremely positive. And a second concern, as also something that I said before, I was kind of worried that being a bank, it would have been extremely financial or economic from different perspectives. And of course, it is. But it has, at least my unit, since it's part of the projects department, doesn't really go that in depth. I'm struggling, to be honest, a little bit with Excel, but I'm sure it's more a question of getting used to the whole tasks that it offers. But yeah, I would say that those were the main concerns. In terms of expectations, I was really looking forward, first of all, to get a first-hand experience, but also to get to meet people and to be in a dynamic environment. And okay, maybe I'm in a dynamic environment, but I'm still lacking contact with people for the whole COVID situation. But yeah, I wouldn't say that's mainly like my primary concern.
Great. Tennessee, do you want to answer that last question? I think then we can wrap it up in terms of the expectations and whether they were met.
Like, you mean last questions? Like, yeah. Yeah, just to say something about the COVID, you can walk from, like for ESMA, for the moment, you can walk, at the moment, you can walk from everywhere in the world. Like half of my team is in Italy. You can walk from Canary Islands if you want. I mean, it depends. It depends if you can live with your grant there, but I suppose it's cool. Accessible, non-EU national, yeah. Any concern or expectations? Well, like a lot of people, actually, I didn't know ESMA a few months before applying. And I didn't understand what it was at the time. And when you apply to ESMA, you apply to a general offer. It's mine was the financial markets profile. You can precise which department you want in your cover letter, but it's still very general. So when I received this interview from the market data policy team, I was like, okay, data. I'm not a data analyst. I don't understand anything about that. I don't have a strong econ profile. So I was like, okay, I don't know what it's about. And that was really like the policy side, which is very interesting. So no, I did not have so much expectation. I didn't really know what was like the daily basis work. And actually, after like 2 months, at the beginning, I was seeing this experience as a first-hand experience, and I was like, okay, I will just like get a bit of experience and then move somewhere else in central banking. Like certainly, like I was thinking about the Bank of England at the time, maybe like the ECB after, but still it's in Frankfurt. I'm sorry for that. I'm not ready. But yeah, more and more I think like the job is very interesting. It's in Paris. The headquarters is very, very nice. It's in the center of Paris, and particularly since I discovered the rooftop, I think I will try to reconduct my interview, my traineeship. But no, that's very cool. Like the people are very nice, and that's again, that's growing, and every competencies from the institution is actually like increasing massively. So it's very interesting. And did I miss any question?
No, I think those are all the questions.
Okay.
If there's any last minute ones, you can pop in the chat. Otherwise, I think we're going to end the panel for today. Thank you all very much for coming and taking the time out of your day to speak to us. It's been very insightful, at least for me personally, so thank you. I think, I guess you have all said that would it be okay if the members reach out to you over LinkedIn if they have any outstanding questions? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. On LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming again. And yes, we'd love to perhaps have you back another time. But yeah, thank you all for coming, and thank you for all the people who have stayed for the full hour and a half.
Okay.
Bye, and have a nice evening.
Thank you for having us. Bye bye.
Thank you.